A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Let's turn our attention to another one of the darkest issues emerging in our nation as new technologies are not being used for good, but also for evil. And so an adults-only conversation today, so a warning for parents to shield little ears from some heavier sexual conversation this hour. We're going to be talking about AI, about deep fakes, and about how vulnerable our kids are to predatory forces that are shaping their lives. Just imagine for a moment your 14-year-old son is sitting in his room scrolling through his iPhone when he sees a message from a young woman inviting him to chat. He responds, and within minutes, she sends him a naked picture and invites him to send her one too. He does, and that's when the sextortion starts. The attractive young woman turns out to be a much older man in another country and part of a global crime syndicate, targeting boys just like your son through multiple fake online profiles. The scammer demands money or gift cards, threatening to send the boys nude images to his friends and family. Well, an important conversation today with our special guest, Melinda Tankard Reist, is joining us. Melinda leads Collective Shout and is one of the champions defending women and children in our hypersexualised world. Melinda Tankard Reist, a special welcome back to 2020.
Always good to be with you, Neil. Thank you.
Melinda, let's start with perhaps a reflection on the very real story that we talk about in the introduction that I just read, and a New South Wales boy who took his life late last year. This is a story you're across, so what do you understand about it?
Look, it's such a tragedy for that family, Neil, and so many families impacted by their sons being preyed on through these global sextortion scams. In the case of the New South Wales boy, he was online, he was scrolling through his socials, he sees a message from a girl he thinks looks attractive. Within minutes, she's invited him to chat and sends him a nude picture. He then reciprocates and discovers to his horror that this is actually a male. It's a man who is part of a global criminal gang based in West Africa, preying on boys just like him. And tragically, he didn't let anyone know he'd been scammed, he'd been tricked, and within 4 hours, only 4 hours, had taken his life due to the shame. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that this is not a few random men here and there tricking a few boys. This is a global criminal enterprise. They own and run thousands and thousands of accounts that look to be held by real women, very realistic images of women, and that's how they get fooled. Then the scammer demands money, gift cards, threatens to send those naked images to the boys' friends and family. And a lot of boys pay money, but then realise they need to pay more and more money because the demands get bigger. So this is a global issue. More and more boys are getting caught up in it. Just in the last 18 months alone, our police are saying they've had a 400% increase in reports to them of boys being scammed and tricked in this way. And they're the boys reporting. You can imagine how many are not wanting to say anything about it at all.
Guilt and shame, those are very, very powerful emotions. And as you say, the real tragedy of the New South Wales story is that that boy took his own life within 4 hours of that guilt and shame taking a hold in him. What for a lot of people, young people too, the guilty pleasure of those moments looking at images online. I'm wondering whether you've got a reflection now that AI has taken a hold and has accelerated the way these things can be really challenging for adults, but we're talking mainly particularly about young people today. When AI takes hold, now we're seeing real outcomes like suicides. That's tragic, isn't it?
It really is. Neil, and this is a conversation that every parent needs to have with their sons. We actually need to normalise this, because bots and predators are preying on our boys, and so many more boys are at risk of losing their lives if we don't have a conversation where we say to our boys, if you're online, you will be preyed on. You are at risk of these global sextortion scams. We need to talk to our boys and tell them, do not pay money, do not continue the conversation, cut off all communications, screen capture the accounts you've been contacted through, notify police, notify the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, and show them how normal this is. There's an excellent resource through the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. It's a 7-minute interactive experience that you can watch with your sons that take you through how easy it is to be scammed, to be tricked in this way, and it follows the true experience of a 15-year-old boy. So what AI is doing is it's being weaponized against our young people. The images that are being created of allegedly real women AI is being used to create those images, and that's why they are so realistic. So huge threats, especially to our boys. All of the reports of sextortion to e-safety have involved boys, and they are at risk. You mentioned the shame of it. That's the tragedy if the boys can't admit this has been happening to them. They are at grave risk of self-harm, and so we have to normalise it.
What goes hand in hand with this weaponisation is perhaps the emergence now of what we'd understand are called deep fakes. Image or a video, a person's face or a body digitally altered to make it appear as though they're somebody else. This is one of those real tragedies that, again, is on the rise, and we're going to hear more and more sad stories. But what are your thoughts around the emergence of deep fake images and videos?
When we talk about deep fakes, we need to realise that while the images are fake, often it's the faces of real girls that are being superimposed onto the bodies of naked women. So what we're seeing, I'm in Victoria at the moment, and it's just happened here recently at Bacchus Marsh Senior High School, where 50 girls' images were used to create the so-called deep fake nudes, these sexually explicit digital fakes. So imagine the horror for those girls to discover that their innocent picture has been scraped, has been appropriated from their social media pages and superimposed onto a naked body, and then the boys share them on social media. So those girls can protest that it's not really them, it's not really their bodies, but often they're not believed. Imagine the terror of discovering that. Now, this school was uncovered recently. The boys at that school were uncovered recently as engaging in this behaviour, but this school is not an outlier. Even more recently, New South Wales boy had created 300 explicit so-called deep fake images using the faces of real girls and a real female teacher. Imagine her horror at discovering that her image was being circulated, superimposed onto a naked body. These boys are becoming self-appointed pornography producers. That's what they're doing, and they're getting popularity for doing that. But again, these schools are not outliers. I have met girls this has happened to, young girls this has happened to. This is a criminal offence. It's image-based abuse, also known as non-consensual image sharing. If those girls are minors, and often they are, the boys that are using AI to create these images can end up on the child sex offender register for producing and disseminating what is essentially pornography. So every woman and every girl is at risk. There are apps that are called nudifying and undressing apps. 32 companies have created these apps that can undress the image of any woman or any girl within seconds. This puts every woman and every girl in the world at risk, and tragically, so many women and girls are discovering their actual images are being used for this malign purpose.
So really powerful to be thinking where things are at. And we started talking about the vulnerabilities of boys who are accessing some of these things through their social media. The school we're talking about, the Bacchus Marsh Grammar School, where the student, those 50 girls, their faces on images. It's interesting that the school reported that the girls had a range of emotions when they realised that they were exploited in this way. I wonder if you've got any reflection on the sort of things that happen in a girl's thinking when she is exposed and when she is exploited and when she is embarrassed in front of her friends. Any thoughts here?
I really appreciate you asking that question, Neil, because I think unless it's happened to us, we cannot fathom the horror. Imagine your innocent picture scraped from your social media profile and used in the production of pornography. These images are now being shared to global pornographic forums, global galleries and collections, circulated by men around the world. Once that image is created and shared, that's it. It is over for her. You cannot get that image back. Those images are going to haunt you for the rest of your life and end up in global collections. Many people will think that that is really you, that you really created that image. They won't understand or believe that it's actually a deep fake production, that your image was actually stolen for that evil purpose. So for many of those girls, they are going to be facing absolute shock, horror, shame, embarrassment. Even for girls it hasn't happened to, they'll think, could I be next? Girls are already facing a mental health crisis. This is a global issue now where so many girls are suffering depression and anxiety and self-harm, low self-esteem, poor academic performance, disordered eating, body image issues. But this is now one more added burden on their already fragile mental health. They won't want to turn up to school. They won't want to be seen in public. They won't want to be recognised in the street. You know, we're already seeing a rise in absenteeism and school refusal in girls. There's no mystery to this. Why would you want to go anywhere where you are going to be shamed and harassed and made fun of, and people are going to actually believe that that is your authentic image just because your face is on it? You know, you have been violated. You've been turned into pornography against your will, and you have lost control. You will not regain control of those images. It is a crime. Image-based abuse, non-consensual image sharing is a crime, but it is very, very difficult to get those images back.
Melinda, it's one thing to talk about boys and schoolboys, we're talking here, becoming porn producers. There's the advent, too, of new pornographic sites, one of those called OnlyFans. And it does appear to be that young women are using the platform to expose themselves, and it's a very significant money-making tool. What are your thoughts on the rise of sites like that as well? Well, it is actually a lie to girls that they'll make lots of money. The average earnings are $140 a month. OnlyFans is preying on our girls. It's telling girls you can make lots of money by selling yourself on this platform. For those that don't know, it's a subscriber-only platform where women sell images of themselves, sell videos of themselves. Now, the best evidence I can give you against OnlyFans is actually a young woman by the name of Victoria Sinners, who heard me speak late last year in Melbourne. A friend had invited her to come and hear me speak. She actually was part of running the largest OnlyFans recruitment agency in Australia. She's only 25 years of age. She heard me speak and was really convicted about what she was involved in. She was actually
recruiting girls from their social media pages, telling them they were hot, telling them how much money they could make if they joined OnlyFans through her agency. She now feels like a pimp. Within 5 days of hearing me speak about OnlyFans and the sex industry in general, she quit that industry and is now working alongside myself and Collective Shout to warn girls, this is where you might end up. You might be stalked. Your images, you'll lose control of them. You'll have to do more and more degrading acts and more debasing acts to make any money at all because it's such a saturated market. And I just had the pleasure actually this weekend of speaking at a fundraiser for Victoria. She's getting opportunities globally as a whistleblower, telling the truth about OnlyFans, the predatory nature of it. The fact is, going back to our AI and our bots, a lot of these men, they think they're talking to the actual girl in the image, but it's actually bot farms in the Philippines that are used to chat with these men. They're not even having an authentic experience at all. So it's just another porn hosting platform, but sadly many of our younger girls are being fooled and tricked to joining that platform. They think, I don't need a real job, I don't need to go to school, I don't need to finish university because I can make lots of money and have lots of nice clothes and become rich and meet lots of interesting men, and it's all a lie.
Very quickly, the resource you mentioned a few minutes back for families to use to sit down with their teenagers and go through that. What was the name of that resource?
That's through the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, and it's called No Escape Room, 7-minute interactive chat. The other thing, Neil, if we've got time, I don't know if we have or if we want to speak about this later, is the way that AI is being used to create child sexual exploitation material, which we've been exposing, including on Instagram.
Melinda, let me come back to some of the things that we've been talking about. Deep fakes. And the fact of now children, school students, making their own pornography at school. The vulnerabilities that there are for not only usually the girls that are the victims of being made into deep fakes by nudifying apps, but these boys putting themselves at risk too because, of course, this is illegal and it comes to child abuse material if they are apprehended for the sorts of things that they're doing. Everyone here is at risk. The ones who are producing it, the ones who are the victims of it. What are your thoughts around that?
Yes, absolutely. AI is being used to facilitate sexual harassment, primarily of girls. We've already talked about the horror experienced by girls who discover their images, their faces have been superimposed on a naked body to generate pornographic images for circulation, and it's a tragedy that many of our boys are becoming self-appointed porn producers. So this is tech-facilitated sexual harassment that is becoming more routine in schools around the country. There's been a couple of big cases exposed in the last month, but the schools that are being exposed are not outliers. This is happening everywhere and will become more common if we don't do something about it. And then, of course, boys at risk of being tricked, being fooled by online global scams, criminal gangs operating the accounts that look like real women, boys getting fooled, getting tricked, thinking they're talking to a real woman when actually they're talking to some man as part of a West African criminal enterprise operating out of a Nigerian slum, not quite the hot young woman he thought he was talking to, and boys have taken their lives as a result. So we are seeing new evils being facilitated by AI, and we need to act to rein in the worst elements. And another serious element of this is that child sexual exploitation material is being generated through AI. And my colleagues and I at Collective Shout have uncovered hundreds of accounts on Instagram alone of young boys. They look real. They're posed and styled in suggestive ways. And what police are saying now is that their reporting systems are going to be overwhelmed because they won't be able to tell the difference between an artificially generated child and a real child. We need to realise that the faces of real children are being used to generate the AI images. So again, any child is at risk. But even if the image is completely artificial and not replicated on the face and body of an actual child, this still puts all children at risk because it increases fantasies for real children by predators, by groomers, by men who have a sexual interest in children. So it's harmful and dangerous whether it's using a real child or a fake child.
It's a dangerous environment, whether we're talking about our girls or about our boys. Just stay with this dangerous environment for a moment, and particularly with schoolboys. I mean, some will say, well, schoolboys will be schoolboys and, there's no stopping what they'll get up to and pushing some boundaries. But here in Australia, virtual child sexual abuse material is illegal. But in the US, if the content does not depict an actual child, it's deemed protected speech and is legal. So we've got this, because online it's a global environment too. So there's something in there. I guess that's a good thing that it is illegal in Australia. When we're talking solutions, that's got to be one good starting point, hasn't it?
Yes, certainly. I'm just going to touch on what you said about this idea that boys will be boys. I think this is such a harmful idea because it's used to excuse harmful behaviours, and it also suggests that boys were somehow missing when consciences were handed out, when right and wrong was being taught. We all have a conscience. We should all understand right from wrong and be taught right from wrong. And this is not, just sort of schoolboys having a lark or mucking around. We are talking serious criminal acts here. We are talking serious sexual harassment, bullying, cruelty, porn production, explicit image sharing. I'm in schools most days in this country, and the stories are getting worse, and they are getting worse younger. I'm now being told stories of boys actually downloading sexual slavery contracts and targeting girls to sign those contracts, including underage girls. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about more female teachers wanting to leave the profession because they're being sexually harassed every day. So we've got to knock this boys will be boys idea on the head, because it actually is beneath boys to say that. We do this work because we actually believe they can be better and shouldn't be deformed and twisted by a toxic culture. So I just wanted to address that one for anyone that might still be saying that. I was hearing that in the 70s, when I was growing up. And so secondly, yes, Neil, absolutely. Australia has got strong laws around these technologies. And in fact, recently the Australian government announced that it would make deepfakes, sharing of deepfakes illegal. But it's actually not enough. We need to ban the nudifying apps. The 32 companies that have created these apps in the first place, and most of the apps only work on women's bodies. They will only undress women's bodies within seconds. We've experimented with these apps. It is devastatingly easy to completely undress a woman. So, you just use a photo of any woman that you want to see naked and the apps will undress them for you. Why is that legal? Like, surely every country in the world should say there's nothing good about this. This is harmful, and they should be banned. So we're calling for a ban on those nudifying deepfake apps. The other issue is that so much harm is done, even with the production of deepfakes, to by the time, some investigation goes through to find who created those images and circulated them and shared them, it's over. Within seconds, those images are ending up on global online porn platforms for men all over the world to enjoy and share. So the damage is real, it's lasting, and it's on the rise. So we're calling for a strengthening of our online safety act, stronger penalties against the perpetrators, and we're calling for a ban on the nudifying and undressing apps. They should not be allowed to exist at all. And this whole idea of free speech in the US, is used to justify a world of harm. And we do not believe that free speech is a justification for harm, which as a community we should all agree we should be protecting our children, our young people, that they are vulnerable, and these companies manufacturing these technologies and those creating the CSAM material, the AI-generated material, don't deserve free speech protection.
The E-Safety Commissioner, her name is Julie Inman-Grant, and she's warned that the sorts of cases we're talking about in schools and such things are just the tip of the iceberg. Are you in communication with the E-Safety Commissioner? Have you made some submissions to the sorts of things that you would hope that she might be there looking out for the welfare of our boys and our girls? What's the relationship, the E-Safety Commissioner? Are they doing enough from your point of view?
Collective Shout does have a relationship with eSafety. We have put in multiple submissions on porn, age verification, strengthening our Online Safety Act. For example, in fact, right now as we speak, we're finalising a submission on strengthening our online safety regulations. We always seem to be writing submissions, and eSafety is aligned with us on much of this. But, they are one authority, they're one regulatory body, and they also will be overwhelmed by the number of reports they are receiving on sextortion, on AI-generated CSAM. And, without global action on this, one regulatory body just cannot manage the deluge of child sexual exploitation material, sextortion reports, harms to girls through these nudifying and undressing apps. So we need a global response to this issue, which is just causing untold amounts of damage and harm.
Banning apps is going to be a key. Age verification, because the governments, both sides, for so long have resisted the idea of actually having age verification, particularly where there's pornography online. But they have had to reverse an earlier decision there because, and I'll get your thoughts here, but it seems to be because things are so out of control now, they've got to be seen to be doing something. What are your thoughts here around age verification? Is this too late or what?
Well, Collective Shout was actually really behind the campaign for age verification, proof of age protection, so that little kids couldn't just enter rape porn, torture porn, sadism, incest porn at the click of a button. Collective Shout have been pushing for age verification for many years. We were involved in inquiries into the harms of pornography to children. We consulted with eSafety. We were part of stakeholder roundtables with eSafety. Last year, we were so disappointed when the federal Labor government said no to the recommendation from its own eSafety Commissioner, who you've mentioned, Julie Inman-Grant, for an age verification pilot in this country. Then what happened was the rates of violence against women were increasing, some horrendous cases this year, and the government called an emergency crisis cabinet meeting, national cabinet meeting. We just put so much pressure on the government in the lead up to that meeting. And we said, you cannot address violence against women if you do not address pornography as a driver of attitudes which normalise violence against women. The most popular genres of porn are the most violent. And this is what our boys are looking at and consuming, and think that sexuality is, that women and girls should be hurt. More girls are reporting porn-inspired behaviours from boys, for example, choking and strangulation. And so we basically deluged the government with messages in the lead up to that cabinet meeting saying, you have to address this. This has to be on the agenda. The fact is that adolescent boys now are committing the highest rates of crimes against women in this country, and are now the largest perpetrators of crimes against children. This has not been seen before in history. It's also replicated in the UK, where the data has been collected. And fortunately, at that meeting, the government announced a reversal of its decision and decided it would go ahead with an age verification pilot, which we welcomed.
Do you know if that's started yet?
We have urged that be started as soon as possible, that it not be delayed. We have urged that the best organisations in the world are appointed to conduct that review, and we've made recommendations as to who that should be. We've also said We want to know who is going to assess the results and evaluate those. We don't want this to disappear down some bureaucratic black hole. We need a time frame on it, a start time, a finish time, who's going to run it, who's going to evaluate it. We don't have the answers to those questions yet, but we are being vigilant on that front.
Melinda, you mentioned police. The number of cases that are coming across police desks is beginning to be overwhelming. And you mentioned that they can't tell the difference between real and fake child pornography, because we're talking about child abuse material here. But the availability of any, whether it's based on real children, I think you said real children, that's where the modelling is coming from. But the fantasies about children, what does that mean for the future? And we've all been so desperately concerned about the rise of pedophilia. There's been such an emphasis on it. But what does that mean for where pedophilia is heading into the future?
Well, these accounts normalise sexual interest in children. They create fantasies where there may not have been fantasies before. Not all of these men have a predisposition towards a sexual interest in children. That sexual interest is being created through these accounts which normalise sexual interest in children. This is part of the broader issue with pornography. Because the consumer becomes habituated to certain content, they need harder and more transgressive content to get the same hit, and they end up consuming child sexual exploitation material. They may not have started out with a pedophilic interest in children as technically understood. So we are actually creating new pedophiles. We're creating new consumers of child sexual exploitation material, and the mainstream social media platforms are enabling this. This is not content that you had to go to the dark web to find, that you had to have, secret hidden accounts and underground networks. This is happening out in the open. My colleagues are reporting hundreds of these accounts on Instagram. Why are the big tech platforms, the social media platforms, hosting and profiting from child sexual exploitation material? That's a question that we are asking, and police globally are just going to be totally overrun. Also, what is happening in parallel is that Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, has decided to move to encryption. Police are saying that as a result of encryption, they are not going to find something like 85% of child sexual exploitation material that is now hidden by encryption through Facebook. I mean, it doesn't get much more mainstream than that, does it? So this is a disaster for global law enforcement, for policing, for investigations, and it's a disaster for children who may never be discovered and are being abused to satisfy the sexual interests of these men globally.
Melinda, we're talking today on the national Christian broadcaster, Vision Christian Media, all around Australia, communities everywhere. I wonder if you've got any thoughts about faith communities, because faith communities are not immune from these issues around child exploitation, pornography, people doing the wrong thing. There are some really good, there's some really good ammunition in the barrel that faith communities have to look to a higher set of values. But do you have a message at all? Faith communities, not immune, but there needs to be perhaps some leadership that comes from churches and organisations within communities. Any thoughts for where those communities might have a real role to play in the future?
Yes, Neil, thank you for asking that, because I have been working with more church leaders now who are acknowledging the problem. They're acknowledging that their faith communities are not immune from a pornified culture. Pornography has invaded our sacred spaces. I have girls telling me that boys make sexual groaning, moaning and grunting noises at them at school, in the school ground, on the school bus, at the school camp, and in the daily worship in the school's chapel. That was a new low for me, hearing that, because porn has invaded our sacred spaces. Boys in youth groups are being exposed to porn. They're being exposed to the bots, the same bots and the same predators. They're not distinguishing between Christian kids and kids who are not part of a faith community. I have girls in churches telling me that the boys don't always treat them that well. So I think, there's a failure here in the formation of good men, good boys. The fact is that many church leaders, youth group leaders are consuming pornography. That's a tragic fact. That's a tragic reality. I have seen the data. I'm not making this up. So how does the church tell the world how it should behave and act when pornography is a problem within the church? And I commend those churches that are wanting to face this. I commend those churches that are setting up safe spaces, especially for boys, to talk about this, to talk about the pressures that they are under. I commend the churches that are acknowledging the harm being done to women and girls through compulsive habitual porn-using men who do not want to change, which is something I documented in my book, He Chose Porn Over Me, Women Harmed by Men Who Use Porn. That book has a whole resource section on how to help the partners of habitual porn-consuming men who don't want to change. There's resources there, pastoral care resources as well, podcast support groups, online resources. So thank you to the churches who do want to address this horrible, dark issue. Gosh, we wish we didn't have to, but we have no choice. This is really, Neil, a question about the future of civilization. That may sound like overreach, but I don't believe it is, because we are destroying love, we're destroying empathy, we're destroying respect, and destroying the chance for these young people to have healthy, loving, long-term, committed, devoted relationships. So surely the church should be at the forefront of defending human dignity, speaking against the degradation of any person, any human person, and being at the forefront of leading the charge against these harmful, vile, evil technologies, which are really changing who we are as a civilization. Like, what kind of world do we want to have for our children? That's what this is about, and I think every person of faith should be concerned about this.
Every person of faith, every church community to take on board the warning that we've heard through this conversation with Melinda, Tankard, Reist, and ultimately it comes back into each of our families and the way that we might care for our own girls and boys who are going to be exposed to a hypersexualized world, perhaps so much different to what all of us were raised in. Just to mention, age verification was one of those solutions. Another one of those solutions was getting those 32 apps banned that are enabling some of the AI-driven pornography being produced even by young people. And there was a resource that you mentioned a little earlier, a resource from the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children, just to mention that, No Escape Room. Something further to add? Any other resources that come to mind, or from you, Melinda?
Yes, a really good website for faith communities is resistporn.org, free resources there for churches, for youth leaders, for couples, for Christian schools. I commend that to you as well. Collectiveshout.org, we have resources there. We'd love your listeners to join up. We are leading the charge against AI-generated harms in this country. We currently have an end of financial year fundraiser. We are tax deductible. We need as much help as we can get if we are going to rein in the worst aspects of technology-driven abuse, especially of women and girls, and especially the sextortion scams against our young men. If you are concerned about what we're talking about here today, we would love your support. We need your support. Collective Shout is a tiny little team. We're five women. No one actually is even doing this full time. It's around other commitments. We need as much help as we can get. And the good news, Neil, and we need some good news, don't we, is last year was our record year. We had 23 victories. This year alone, so far, we have just announced our 15th victory for the year, and we are well on track to even surpassing last year. And one of those victories this year was securing the age verification pilot that we have discussed. So there is hope if people decide to care. Silence is the language of complicity. Speaking out is the language of change. If even half your viewers signed up to Collective Shout today, Neil, we could make even more advances and more strides in the best interests of our young people and our community as a whole.
Well, collectiveshout.org, and as Melinda says, and oftentimes we find ourselves only talking about the challenging difficulties that we face when we're unpacking those things that are arising in our society, but to hear of some wins, and some of those small wins, and some of those significant wins. Every now and then you need to go and look at some of those wins to be encouraged that the battle's not lost, but we need to all be engaged in it. And as Melinda says, when you go to collectiveshout.org, there is an end of financial year appeal, and you might be led there to make a donation. And their AI fundraiser is their end of financial year appeal. We've been talking about AI and weaponised AI. Melinda, just wonderful getting your insights. It's always difficult in these conversations, but so enlightening to understand where the battle is at when it comes to these challenges. So collectiveshout.org. Melinda, Tankard, Reist, thank you so much for sharing these thoughts with us today on 2020.
Neil, thanks for the opportunity. We're very grateful for it. Thank you.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.